Okay, so that our colleagues who cannot join us today, we can share the link with them afterwards. So this is our first, or sorry, not our first, our second Marshall Mondays, and we're joined by the University of East Anglia. So we have Alana who's going to kind of start with providing an overview. And if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to pop them in the chat or raise a hand. I think it's going to be quite an interactive session. So however you feel more comfortable asking questions, please do. So that being said, I'll hand over to you, Alana.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Haley. And thanks everyone for joining us on the Marshall Monday. Good afternoon or good morning, I guess, depending on what coast you're on, or good afternoon for the UK people. So just briefly what we're going to do today. So we're going to do a general UEA introduction, which I will take care of. And then we'll do introductions to the panel. We'll have some Q&A, which is really where we want you all to interact. And then we will share contact information at the end too, in case you do want to get in touch with me or any of the scholars or Tom, who's going to be our moderator for today with the panel. So I am kind of the UEA contact for you all. I am based in Michigan. I've been working with UEA for about 6.5 years now. So I'm really who students go to for support, both undergrad and postgrad. I am actively involved in the Fulbright process to that selection process. So if there are any questions kind of involving that, I'm happy to kind of answer, obviously in a more generalized fashion. Not giving anybody any secrets to anything, but just so you know kind of what we're looking for in case you have any questions about that too. So students are more than welcome to reach out to me. You all are more than welcome to reach out to me. I do attend NAFA conferences when I'm able to. Just as a kind of caveat to all of that, I am due with my first child at the end of April, so I will be out at the university, but there will be contacts for you in my absence in case you do need to reach out to anybody, because I know obviously too that will be an important timing in the process for the applications for scholars. So moving on about University of East Anglia. So we were founded in 1963, being a relatively young university. We've done a great job at establishing ourselves since then. So we're ranked in the UK top 30 and the world top 250. So it is a great university to be sending your students for. Or sending your students to. We have about 17,000 students on our campus. That does put us in the large category technically, although I do feel like it's a bit more of the mid-size because we're not as large as obviously some of the other universities are. We are located in Norwich, England. The scholars will talk about their experience there, but I think it's a very unique place, a very special place to be going to university. We talk about it being a hidden gem just because it is kind of tucked away in the countryside, about an hour and a half northeast of London by train. We get our name from that East Anglia region, which again is not necessarily someplace a lot of people have on the map, but it should be because it is such a great place to live. It's safe. It's won a lot of awards in the past couple years, and I think people just tend to fall in love with it when they study there. I know we had a former Fulbright who wanted to come back and was trying to plot his trajectory in order to get back to Norwich. So I feel like if that doesn't say enough, I think I think our scholars should be able to talk a little bit more about that. So our flagship programs are the ones that we're more well known for, are environmental science, specifically climate change science, and then also creative writing. So we had one of the first masters of creative writing in the UK. So we get a ton of students that apply for that program. It is pretty competitive, but with that said, the three kind of areas that they can go into are poetry, prose, and script writing. We have a couple of other programs as well, but it really is, what students know or what people tend to know us for. So some of our graduates have been Kazuo Ishiguro, who now has, I think he just got nominated for, I think, one of the Academy Award, one of the big ones for film for his script, and then also has written novels. And then we also have Anne Enright and then Ian McEwan too. So a lot of Ian McEwan's books have been changed into feature films as well. Other top programs are listed there. So business, history, law, physiotherapy, media and film studies, economics, international relations. global development. And I was going to say we do have 2 students here from global development today, so that's awesome. Sports science and then also health professions. We do have scholarships and FAFSA loans available. So for those who aren't getting the Fulbright or the Marshall or any other type of scholar program or scholarship, we do have scholarships available. Those tend to be for or more available for some of the programs like development studies and creative writing, but we do just have a general one. So I always say for sometimes for students, if they aren't successful with the application process, there are some scholarships that they can buy for that will be a significant contribution or significant reduced amount off of their tuition fees. Our requirements are typically a 3.0 plus in the undergraduate degree. So that's what we're looking for the vast majority of our programs. Some are going to require additional supplemental materials like creative writing. You're going to have to submit a portfolio for that. But I was going to say, we don't require a test, no GRE, anything like that. So it's a relatively straightforward process for students. And there is no application fee. And then our tuition fees do start at $23,320 for those, again, who aren't successful in the process. It is affordable, very affordable comparatively to US post-grad courses. And our courses are 1 full calendar year in duration. So typically September to September. So it is a shorter program at the end of the day. And then we do have accommodation available on campus. It is guaranteed for our students, so that starts at about 43 or 4,400 US dollars for that postgraduate year. So it's worth checking that out. But a lot of our students do tend to live off campus, especially if there's multiple. So we do have 2 Marshalls currently, I was going to say, on the call. So sometimes those students decide to live together or they find other people that they want to live with too. Just depends on the situation, but there is more than enough off-campus housing in Norwich if they don't want to live on campus. So that's kind of pretty much it. I am going to be around for technical questions in case there are some, because again, I'm a little bit more of the nuts and bolts person, more so than the student experience type. So I am going to pass it off onto Dr. Tom Roebuck, who is a lecturer in literature. And also he serves as the Associate Dean for Admissions in the Faculty of Arts and Humanities too. So he's a big man on campus right now, especially for arts and humanities. But just in general too. So I'm very happy to have him here and very happy and very pleased that he said he would do this for us. So he will serve as your moderator. And again, I'll kind of tuck back in the background, but be here to answer any questions that you might have, again, that are a little bit more technical, that maybe he or the scholars may not know. So Tom, if you want to take over it from this point, I'll fade into the background.
Thank you so much, Alana, for that wonderful introduction to us and to UEA. And I want to say welcome and hello to all of you who are joining us on the call today. It's a real honour to be with you and from joining you from the city of Norwich. And from UEA, and so hello and welcome wherever you are in the UK, the United States. My name is Tom Roebuck, and Alana's already done a far too generous job of introducing me. My own specialism, academic specialism, is literature. So I teach literature, and my particular work is about the 16th and 17th century literature, and especially about the development of the study of the humanities themselves in that period. So, but I'm not here to talk about my research or myself. At UEA, we genuinely do. I think this really is true, that we genuinely always put the students at the center of everything we do, and that was why we wanted to do this format today, which is more of a panel discussion with our wonderful 3 students at UEA who are holding Marshall and Fulbright scholarships, and to really give them the chance to talk about their experiences of the application process and of why UEA, to pass on their wisdom and advice, and to hear a little bit about their studies and what they're up to. So I wonder if I might perhaps just actually start by asking you all to introduce yourselves. Jada, could I perhaps start with you? And if you could also note which of the scholarships you're holding, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. My name is Jada Olson. I am currently doing my master's degree in media, culture, and society, and that's through the Fulbright Postgraduate Study Award versus any type of research type thing. I'm originally from Minneapolis, Minnesota, so right in the Midwestern region of the States, and I did my undergraduate degree in sociology with a double minor in communications and African American studies at the American University in Washington, D.C. So that's me.
Fantastic, thank you, Jada, and thank you for being with us on the call. Could I now ask Greta? Greta, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. I'm Greta. I'm a 2022 Marshall, so I'm in my first year of the Marshall Scholarship. It's a 2-year scholarship for me, so this is my first year. I'm at UEA. I'm doing a master's in environment and international development. I'm from Chicago originally, so also the Midwest. But my undergrad I did in Pittsburgh, and I studied civil engineering and engineering and public policy with a big focus on water systems and water equity.
Brilliant, thank you, Greta. And now we've been in something of a Midwest bubble, but now I want to introduce you to introduce yourself, Kayla, and tell us where you're from in the States and what you've been studying.
Yeah, so my name is Kayla Lucero Matusi, and I'm a 2021 Marshall Scholar in my second year now. I am from Albuquerque and Placitas, New Mexico, and I studied at Fordham in my undergrad. I did political science and international relations, as well as Spanish studies. And at UEA, I'm in the MSc in climate and international development.
Brilliant, brilliant. I'd like to all just say a little bit more about the kind of things that you're studying now, the kind of things that you're interested in. Maybe Kayla, can I just stay with you? Tell us a little bit. Do you have a kind of particular kind of research specialism? Just tell us a little bit about your interests.
Yeah, so I came from a background in nuclear policy. I was doing nuclear non-proliferation and arms control type stuff before this, and was drawn to a center at Cambridge that I currently work at, which is called the Center for the Study of Existential Risk. And so I've been, through my Marshall Scholarship experience, threading together what we refer to in my field as anthropogenic risks to humanity. So I work on human caused things that could be really dangerous to everyone. And so I came to UEA seeking out more expertise in climate and environment, which is why I chose the program that I'm in. But I work a little bit on the intersections of artificial intelligence and climate change and nuclear war. But it's been really great to work with some of the professors and other students at UEA, because they bring a very special skill set in environment.
It's really fascinating work, Kayla, absolutely fascinating. And so in the first year of your Marshall, were you at the Cambridge Research Centre that you mentioned?
Yes, so my first year was at Cambridge. I did an MPhil in politics and international studies, and I started working at the center during that time as well.
And how did you first become interested in the topic of existential risk?
Well, being from New Mexico, a lot of those topics are on our back doorstep. I mean, that's kind of where the atomic age started in a lot of ways, but we have the labs there, and we're also the 5th or 6th fastest warming state as far as climate change. So, but we're also a very poor state, and we are a majority minority state, and so we have a lot of Superfund sites, and I mean, a lot of environmental impacts are experienced there. So I think just growing up and seeing how communities were affected by some of these different issues, it made me interested in leaving and seeing what that was all about. But ultimately, why I love UEA is that it's kind of the development department, in my experience, is very community and justice oriented, which is cool.
Absolutely fascinating and really interesting to how you sort of connecting your kind of experiences growing up in Albuquerque with then the research topics as they've unfolded, and having spoken a little bit already to Jada and Greta, I know that's perhaps going to be an interesting theme that will emerge. Maybe I could jump to you, Jada, actually, and ask you just to perhaps just tell us a little bit similarly. I know you're an MA student on media culture and society. What kind of research interest do you have? Just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. So in my undergraduate degree, a lot of my research was really focused on like the ability to explain pop culture or explain complicated theory through pop cultural events. And I've always been really passionate about making scholarship like as accessible as possible and as interesting as possible, and trying to kind of like blow things up and show how theory can apply to every portion of our lives and how it's not just something that's like lofty and kind of in space or something that's locked in the ivory tower of academics, but is something that we're all interacting with constantly. So when I was looking at MA programs, I did my degree in sociology, but then I worked in public relations for like a year and a half. So I was looking for something that really was able to combine like the cultural studies background that I was interested in and I've always been interested in, and then also something that like understood where communications comes into play with all of that. And those have always been kind of like my top two interests. So like our program is all about how media actually does impact society and how we are all involved with it and interacting with it on the daily. So I just felt like it was just the right fit for what I wanted to do and how I wanted to kind of see myself as both a scholar and as somebody who's going to be in the work world once again at some point. But yeah, I have the ability now to like discuss with all my course mates and my different professors, like the range of this stuff and being able to look at a lot of different topics, whether it's social media or right now I'm talking to one of my professors about studying Megan Thee Stallion and Little Sims. So just kind of like the range of these things and seeing how they come together is what I'm most interested in.
And do you have a particular media form that you might concentrate on in your dissertation, or is that's of most interest to you? Or I mean, you're obviously incredibly wide-ranging in the kind of things that you're studying.
Yeah, I think most likely I'm going to be looking at music, and that was what I had originally written my Fulbright application on, and it was a different topic focusing on music, but I think I'll stick with that. In undergrad, I did a lot more film-focused stuff, so I think I'm going to turn my attentions.
Fantastic. And then Greta, I know you've started already to say that you have an interest in water, and I'm kind of thinking this actually connects across both of our panelists in some really interesting ways. Tell us a little bit about your research.
Yeah, so I went into my undergrad knowing that I wanted to do water and water systems. I was just really passionate about that. And I got in like right away my freshman year doing some water research about water equity and low income housing communities. And upon doing that research, and I had an opportunity in my undergrad to take a trip to Israel and Palestine to analyze the effect of water technologies on geopolitical relations. I discovered that like safe access to water is not just a civil engineering problem, you know, and it's so much more of an interdisciplinary, international relations, international development problem than I had realized in my engineering degree. So I started to do a lot of work on specifically desalination as a research focus in my undergrad, which is the water technology that is employed in Israel, and it has effects on Israel and Palestine relations. And so then when I was looking for this master's program in the UK, there's a wonderful professor at UEA. His name is Mark Zatoun. He does a lot of work on water politics called hydrohegemony, or like water and power. And it kind of looks at how water technologies serve to reinforce or dismantle this kind of international power. So there was this kind of like through line of like, I was really passionate about water, and I figured out that UEA is just this wonderful place for me to continue to pursue that. So
Fantastic, fascinating, and it sort of makes me think as well about Norfolk as and where we're where we're based, and perhaps some of our people on the call might be interested, and also your work, Kayla. That Norfolk itself is kind of something of the vanguard of Britain's experience of climate change, and there's a little bit like you're kind of saying about Albuquerque and where you were growing up. That we have all the coastal communities in Norfolk that have been experiencing coastal erosion, and many other sort of impacts. So no, it's really interesting. We might draw out some of these themes around place and research and so on as we move forward. Really fascinating. So three very distinctive, but also I think richly sort of complementary areas for us to explore. Tell me a little bit about the application process. Now, I suppose I'm interested in, how did you first come to even think about the idea of the scholarship? Maybe Jada, could you tell us a little bit about, just take us back to that, how you got interested in the scholarship and how the process started to unfold?
Yeah, sure. So I actually first heard about the Fulbright scholarship, I think when I was at my second year in uni, and I went to like an information download session on a bunch of different international programs and programs that would grant you the opportunity to study in different places. And then I kind of didn't really think about it until I was in my final year. And I was talking with the Office of Merit Awards, and they asked me if I would be interested in kind of exploring some of these different options for a postgraduate award. And so from there, I just did a ton of research on Fulbright and all the things that you could do with it, like research versus postgrad, and went and talked to the Merit Awards office a lot and talked to some former Fulbrighters as well, through the alumni networks at my undergraduate university, and just continued to kind of explore that. And yeah, from there, I was kind of trying to understand, like, how could I make a research project come to life, and what would it also look like if I was to do it in a postgraduate space versus something that was independent. And I knew that I was looking for a little bit more structure. I wanted like that kind of like typical grad school experience versus something that would be independent the full time. So I really loved that Fulbright was able to offer that option as well. So that was kind of how I came to Fulbright originally.
No, brilliant. And in terms of the application process, talk us through it. What kind of things did you submit? How did you put it all together?
Yeah, so for Fulbright, there's a research proposal, and then there's also a personal statement. So for the research proposal, I really just kind of like talked to a lot of different professors about some of my own interests and just try to sort of shape something until something actually like came alive and stuck. And one of the things I was really interested in my final semester of my senior year was punk and the punk subculture specifically. So I decided to explore that for my actual research proposal, and I'd studied abroad in South Africa for about a month and a half in 2018. So I did like a connection of the punk movements in South Africa and the UK and the US, and just did a ton of research on that and really did a deep dive to kind of shape up that research proposal and talk about my own interest in pop culture and how I was going to move that through. And then there's the personal statement as well. So that was for me personally, it was a little more focused on discussion of my own background in social justice and community organizing, which I did a lot of when I was a teenager. In Minneapolis, there's a huge community organizing movement. So it was definitely part of that. And so I was moving that through, and then also talking about my own racial identity. I'm biracial, my mom's Black and my dad's white. So I really wanted to make sure that that was present in my application process and kind of talk about how that has given me a lot of different perspectives and a range of experiences. But I think it's also allowed me to be a better listener and more open to like just discussions with anyone or questions with anyone. And that's part of what Fulbright is always talking about as well, like this ambassadorship or kind of being like a little bit of a diplomat in a way. So I could kind of see myself in that, and that was how I began to shape my application for Fulbright.
Fantastic. And what was it like studying in South Africa?
It was amazing. It was so cool. It was like we had a focus on arts and resistance, and we were able to meet like all these artists who were really active during kind of like the final stretch of apartheid. So from the 70s to the 90s, we talked with people in unions, people who were hip hop artists, punk artists, graffiti artists, and we were just able to kind of move through different places in the country. We were in Johannesburg and Cape Town and in townships outside of Cape Town, just meeting people, studying art, going to museums, and it was just honestly life-changing and really beautiful. So Yeah.
Wow. It's really interesting to hear sort of with the application process as a whole, you kind of got punk as a kind of form that's crossing from South Africa to Britain to US, and then you've also got your own life, which is sort of in the personal statement, which kind of mingles together traditions and cultures, and it just feels like there's kind of there's something there about kind of how your I suppose kind of life and research sort of connects to one another. Maybe if I'm thinking about it correctly.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Like I've always kind of seen my own personal identity experience as like a cross-cultural experience in itself. So I was kind of excited to like be able to make these connections between these three very, very distinct places. So yeah.
Yeah, no, fascinating. Taylor, can we go to you? Tell us a little bit about your story in terms of the application process with the Marshall. How did you hear about it? Did you have a mentor or anyone who inspired you? And what was your what sort of things did you write? So just sort of tell us the story, really.
Yeah, well, now I'm distracted. I want to talk about punk music, but I I was doing a Fulbright in London before the pandemic, and but it was a research Fulbright. So I was sitting at a center at King's College London where I met a Marshall Scholar, and I had not been considering graduate studies at any near point in the future before I spoke with her. But she's amazing. Her name is Jamie Kwong, and she was doing her PhD there in war studies and doing some nuclear policy work. But we became friends, and during the pandemic, our grants ended early that year, or some of us came back early because of COVID. So I was living in rural Oregon, right in the middle of a bunch of forest fires that were happening during the pandemic, and just having this surreal experience of we had one that was a few miles away from our house, and it was bizarre because you've got global pandemic, increasingly bad extreme weather events all throughout the United States, and like tons of police brutality during that time. And I was contemplating where does work on nuclear weapons policy fit into all of this, and wanting to make connections between different areas of risk that exist. And so I ended up considering the Marshall Scholarship because it does allow you to do 2 degrees. And for me, that was the perfect pivot. I was in my final year of eligibility, I learned when I researched it. But so I decided to apply. And the idea was that I could sort of make my way a little bit out of nuclear policy, not completely, but partially, and pivot more into doing a bit more climate and environment work. And it really was perfect because I think it's super difficult to make career transitions if you're just trying to do that without having some additional credential or something. So that's ultimately why I applied. But the initial impetus was just meeting this wonderful woman, Jamie, who represented the scholarship very well to me. But then she was, like I said, a PhD. So we have some PhD Marshall Scholars in our community, and then other people who do 2 masters.
Fantastic, and it's especially lovely to hear about that sort of inspiring mentorship that you had, and from your friend, and encouraging you to consider this opportunity, and how important that was. But also, like, yeah, it's very helpful to think about that idea of combining the two years of study, and sort of how you did that in terms of kind of existential risk as a topic, which seems inherently to require that kind of interdisciplinary sort of work, or kind of between disciplines. So yeah, no, that's really helpful, Kayla. What kind of things did you submit? Did you did obviously you're writing your personal statement. How did that work?
Yes, I think that the application was focused on different attributes that Marshall wants scholars to have. So there was something along the lines of ambassadorial potential, and I think a leadership one. So, and then educational or academic abilities. So when you're approaching it, you're looking for examples of things from your life that might demonstrate those attributes. But I agree with what you were saying earlier, that it's about determining how you as a person fit into those things, more so than, you know, mapping them onto yourself. So I remember telling a story in one of them, and I think in another one it was more talking about my qualifications. So you really can take any approach. And I think a lot of people believe there's some secret formula, but there's really not. I think as long as you're just excited about what you're talking about and you don't let anyone tell you that you shouldn't take a certain angle. Like if it's exciting to you, you should do it because that's what they're looking for.
Yes, and there's clearly nothing formulaic about the three of you and the amazing array of different things that you're doing and different interests. Greta, can I ask you the same question, really? I mean, just take us through it a little bit from when you were first getting interested in the scholarship to the application process.
Yeah, so my research advisor, who I did the work with water equity in the lower income housing communities with, he was a Rhodes Scholar, so he had some kind of background on UK graduate education, and he really pushed me to apply to a lot of these programs that would get me to the UK, because he really just believed that I could get a really great perspective and that there were really amazing education programs, which I believe to be true in the UK, and I had never really thought to do further education outside of the US before he pushed me to look into it. So I applied for the Fulbright, Rhodes, and the Marshall all together, and the Fulbright I was also applying to UEA. So I really wanted to go to UEA, but I worked really closely with the Carnegie Mellon Fellowships and Scholarships Office, because I applied when I was just finishing up my undergrad. So I graduated last May. I went straight into this, but the process just looked like going through a ton of iterations of essay writing, and a big part of that, kind of what we've been talking about, is like pulling out through your life this like kind of through line in this story that connects kind of like your personal experiences with your academics, with like service and leadership and a lot of other things. And I remember I was really, really struggling with finding this through line. I know that I had like garnered all these amazing experiences in my undergrad, but I was like, how does this all connect to like where I'm going and where I want to be? And I remember my advisor in the fellowships and scholarships office, she asked me a question that was like, what are you most proud of that you've achieved in your undergrad so far? And she made me talk about it for like 10 minutes. And in doing that, I realized what I was like really passionate about and what I was the most proud of out of everything that I'd done in my undergrad. And that was, I'd done a lot of work with uplifting Indigenous voices on campus at Carnegie Mellon. And I realized that like water equity and how that connects with Indigenous populations and how the built environment affects kind of these social justice initiatives is really where I want my work to be going. And that really helped shape the rest of my application. So kind of understanding like what I was most proud of and like what I had done that filled me with joy was kind of how I ended up shaping this final application that I submitted. So.
Fantastic, and also actually also the importance of the mentor figures and you know, people who've inspired you and encouraged you is really heartening to hear that, and yeah, fantastic, thank you. Maybe I could ask then, move on to the next topic, which is absolutely connected to this, which is to ask why UEA. And it's something a lot of you have already started to touch on, but I think, you know, with this call, I think we could really open this out. I mean, Greta, maybe you could just carry straight on. I mean, you know, why UEA? It's obviously a place that you know you were very excited to come. Tell us, bring that to life for us. Tell us why.
Yeah, so again, my research advisor for my undergrad, he had told me to look into Mark Zatoun, who I mentioned earlier. And I knew that as much as I was really interested in doing a graduate program, I was really interested in continuing to be able to do research. In my undergrad, I realized that the thing that filled me up the most and made me want to keep working was doing research and discovering something that had, either like never been discovered before, or that kind of like excitement of being able to help communities through academic research or through engaging with them is amazing. And so I kind of took the whole application process and finding the university with the scope of where can I do the research that I want to be doing. And then also where can I gain the research skills that I want to be pursuing and employing within my academic career. And so UEA has an incredible, obviously, water security research program that Mark does a lot of work with, but also a lot of other professors and scholars at UEA do work with. But also within the School of International Development, I feel like through all of my classes, I've been learning about really wonderful like participatory research methods and kind of gaining firsthand stories. And with my dissertation, I'll have an opportunity to go and do some field work to kind of employ and learn about these new research methods that I hope to be employing. So research was kind of the way that I tackled the academic side of YUEA. The other side of it was because as much as like we are all students and this is a scholarship to pursue further education, we're also all humans. And so a huge part of kind of choosing UEA and where I wanted to be in Norwich was kind of that human aspect of where can I personally grow and where do I think that I would be able to find fulfillment. And a huge thing I wanted to do was gain independence. So I have Kayla and I have Jada, but there's not a whole ton of Americans at UEA. And I love that I've been exposed to such an international kind of like cohort and student body. So I think finding a place in a community where I could also grow personally and as well as academically was kind of two big reasons why I chose UEA. Yeah.
No, I love that, and yeah, and we have students from over 100 countries at UEA, so that's that sense of the diversity of the international student body. But it also strikes me in a way what you're saying is that your research, it seems to me, is very intensely connected to your values, and that UEA was the place which, in terms of its research, sort of shares some of those values in terms of some of the participatory methodologies, for example, that are being developed. Is that right? Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I didn't know this before I came to UEA, but their international development program is like very well renowned for being very ethical in their processes. And I think participatory research is a way in which you can engage communities in a really ethical way. And so in learning about these research methods and in knowing that I want to be doing research that actually helps to build communities up and create capacity within those communities themselves, I feel like, yes, the research that I want to do definitely reflects my values. And I think also like the methods that I want to imply reflects that as well. And I didn't know how deeply those were connected before I got to UEA, and I've really been learning. So I will be sitting in my classes and being like so grateful to just be exposed to these kinds of methods that if I'd stayed in, let's say, like an engineering career, I don't know would be as readily available to me. So yeah.
Yes. Fascinating, fascinating. Thank you. And Jada, could I go to you with the same question? Why UEA? Tell us a little bit about how that worked in your application.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, kind of similar to Greta, I had a professor in undergrad who I took my second year for a law class, actually, who was from just outside of London. And so I had been discussing with him like grad school options and just thinking about studying abroad as well. And he was like, "Have you ever heard about UEA?" And so it was kind of planted in my head when I was like 20. And then when I was looking later on, it just UEA kept coming up over and over. And I think I was really, really drawn though to the specific program that I'm in. And I love the interdisciplinary nature of it. Like I find myself to be a little bit of like a scatterbrained person or just having like a really wide range of interests. So I was really just floored by a program that was like, had all these different options for classes and that were going to be things like as far as social media or media law, or even just talking about like music or television or film. So I wanted something that had really that broad range, and I thought that UEA's program could really bring that to me. And I was also inspired by the range of scholarship that was occurring in PPL. Like I really thought it was cool that a different amount of lecturers and professors were doing just such like a range of research. Like one of the professors I have who teaches in a media law class, like his specialty is actually on sports and focused on football. And there were some professors I talked to in the beginning who were also really open to talk to me, which was amazing, and also really made me feel comfortable with UEA, but who were looking at punk scholarship specifically as well. So I thought that that fit perfectly. And also some professors who were interested in like sharing knowledge as accessibly as possible and creating websites or video series and other things. And that was just exactly what I was focusing on. So it just felt like it was clicking over and over. So yeah, that's what brought me to UEA.
And no, that's fantastic. And so you spoke to people before you applied, and that was helpful. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, I spoke to a range of different professors in PPL, and honestly, I just sent like cold emails, and I said, "Could I just have 15 minutes of your time sometime over the next month or so?" And was just able to sit down with, I think, like 6 or 7 people all over Teams and just talk to them about their own research, how my research might be informed by that, or if there was a possibility of ever working together, or what classes they were looking at, and how they felt about UEA. So it just kind of helped me get more of a feel for the campus and what it might look like in my life as a student. So that was really helpful to me. And UEA was one of the few places where professors just immediately like shot back with like a definite yes. And were always so interested in what I was doing and what my process looked like. So yeah.
I wonder if that values in a way is sort of also connected. You know, we were talking about with Greta, you know, that kind of openness and the kind of inclusive approach that hopefully sounds like you were encountering, you know, perhaps is a theme as well.
Most definitely.
Yeah. Kayla, why UEA?
When I was making the decision of where to apply for my second year, I had actually considered staying on at Cambridge for a PhD, and I decided against it because I felt like I wanted some more, not necessarily technical training in climate change, but closer to that. So I started looking for programs that would combine classes touching on technical fields and classes that had very applied approaches. And then I ended up landing on UEA because of that. And there are a few other schools in the UK that do that, but I don't think they do it as well. Right now, I have some modules that are in the environmental science department, and then I have some that are in the development department. So I was really looking for a university that would allow me to do both. But I guess a retrospective reflection on why UEA is that I agree about the participatory research methods that Greta mentioned. I think they do a really fantastic job of that in development, and it's a plus that I was not aware of when I applied, but I would emphasize now. But also, you know, I had lived in London, and then I did my first year of the Marshall in Cambridge, and so I had experienced like both a very large city in the UK and also an institution that is a private university. And it's, you know, some people, when they think about applying to these scholarships, they might think immediately Oxford or Cambridge. But what I had seen at Cambridge, even though there are so many very bright people there, is that a lot of people had read about things in books, but they weren't always referring to a lived experience. And I'm so glad that I ended up at UEA to study climate change because the vast majority of my cohort are international students, and many of whom are from the global south. So we're talking about their experience of climate impacts in their home countries. And I just have learned so much more than I ever did at Cambridge thinking about these topics, just because there really are limits to what you can theorize about.
That's fantastic. Fascinating, and really connecting with actually a lot of what we've heard about the kind of the breadth of experience, and I'm using that word quite deliberately, that's drawn upon in research terms as well. Anne has asked us a fantastic question, which is, in addition to the UEA website pages, what resources did you use to discover the research areas of the professors at UEA, given that you were obviously already very knowledgeable about that? Would any of you like to jump in there? Greta, maybe?
I mean, I think it's always great to do like a Google Scholar deep dive. I've found the staff, especially in the dev department, is extremely collaborative. So a lot of times if you see like one author on a research paper from dev, you'll see another one from UEA, and or honestly, like you can Google things that you're interested in UEA, because there are people at UEA who are doing so many different things that I couldn't even like imagine. And I've been able to find a lot of really great information from there. But yeah, I always say like do a Google Scholar deep dive, find articles that you find super interesting and who's writing those, where are the universities that those papers are coming out of, and maybe that's UEA, maybe it's not UEA, but that can help you find the place where you're supposed to be. So yeah, I'll say that.
And Jade, thank you, Greta. And Jade, perhaps would you just comment on the same question, because I think you were also, I mean, you were obviously also very knowledgeable about the kind of research that was going on in making contacts before you came, so just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think definitely the same as Greta. Like I'm just kind of naturally nosy as a person too. So I feel like it really helped to like reach out to the professors, and then also like if I was doing Google searches on them and I saw that they had like previous research with somebody who used to work at UEA or somebody who didn't even work at UEA, sometimes I would also reach out to that person as well and kind of dig around. Like actually one of the greatest like contacts and biggest advocates for UEA I had was someone who taught at Queen's in Belfast, who had done work with George Mackay and PPL. And so being able to talk about like the work that they had done previously together and then what they were going to do moving forward, I think also kind of like helped me see that in a bigger picture. So really for me, it was just connecting with people and digging around on Google.
Brilliant, thank you, thank you. And Mark's asked a great question. Could the panel talk about some of the practical aspects of being at a university in the UK? For example, what are your living arrangements? Kayla, would you be kind enough to come in on that, please? Start us off.
Yeah, my situation is unique because my partner also works here, so we actually cohabitate between their job and mine. But I think Greta has probably had more of the authentic experience as far as, and I don't know about you, Jada, but so I have had a partner living here with me. I didn't live in student housing for either experience, but I mean Norwich is lovely, and I know that the housing search, you know, even for me, having two people to attack that problem, it can be challenging. So but I think Marshall does a good job of connecting us with resources along those lines. And then there are always, if you find yourself in that position, there are always past scholars that you can turn to and ask them how they approached housing if they were there the year before. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. When Dennis Lasdon was designing UEA campus in the 60s, and there are many very interesting interviews with him and the architect who designed the campus. He's an award-winning British architect who designed a lot of major buildings, and he was very interested in the idea that at that time there were going to be a lot more students, he felt, who were going to be married. And he was very interested in the idea of how do you create a more a kind of adult experience for them at a university. And I thought that's a really sort of an interesting snapshot of kind of a way of thinking at that time. Anyway, sorry, that's irrelevancy from me. But Greta, perhaps you could comment on Mark's question. There's some of those practical aspects of living in the UK.
Yeah, I think that was probably one of the more stressful things to me about moving to a new country was like, oh, I also have to live here and figure out what that looks like. I think one of the best things about UEA was that there is guaranteed housing, at least like for an individual, I think. And Alana can definitely talk more about that. But I had secured housing through UEA initially, and then I found out that it was a little bit more cost effective to live off campus. So I initially signed a lease and then I ended up moving from that lease to the place that I'm at now. But resources that I found really useful were the Spare Room website / app, where people post like spare apartments or spare rooms. And then the UEA Student Union has a housing Facebook group. So if you want to live with other students, that's also really great. But I would definitely suggest kind of gauging if you're moving there, if you're comfortable signing a lease before you move to a new country because you want that security of moving and then moving right into your house, or moving to a new country, getting an Airbnb or doing something for the first couple weeks so that you can find the place that really fits exactly what you want. I think those are two different routes that people can take, and I can't speak to one being better than the other, um but yeah, I think that experience was made a lot easier by the fact that I knew if all else failed, I had housing secured at UEA initially, but I'm not on campus. I'm living off campus and I love it. It's great.
Fantastic, thank you. I'm conscious we're coming towards our last minutes. It's been a wonderful panel. Thank you so much. I just wanted to ask you, first of all, two sort of questions just to close, really, for each of you. One is, what's your number one tip you'd like to give for somebody applying for a Marshall or Fulbright? And then the other, can you just say anything about your plans for the future? Jada, would you like to start us off with those?
Sure. I think my number one tip would, like, as corny as it sounds, would be like just like follow your heart in it. I think Kayla kind of touched on this earlier, like go after the approach and the proposal that you really feel passionate about. I definitely had people in the start who were saying like, you know, that angle might not work or it might not be something that really fully seems like it's you, but I really felt in my heart that what I was going to write about and what I was interested in was what was going to kind of push me to that next level for the scholarship. So I think just following your research interests and understanding that there is a through line in all of your work would be just kind of my biggest tip on it. And as far as the future, it's been great to have some time to actually just think about my career in a bigger sense. But I think that after this, I previously did agency life, and so I'm kind of looking again at doing something that's in the agency world, but hopefully a little bit more creatively focused, or possibly going into diversity, equity, and inclusion work as well, at some type of media-focused firm. So loose ideas, but they're there.
No, exciting ideas. Thank you. Kayla, same question, tip and plans for the future.
Yeah, I think my tip would just echo what Jada said is, again, don't let anyone tell you what you should write in this application. And not all feedback is good feedback. Sometimes, especially if you have too many cooks in the kitchen, like really make sure that it's a stressful process. It's also a lot of time and labor to put into something. And I think obviously for that reason there are certain access barriers. Like if you apply to this, you will be spending a significant amount of time crafting your application. So make sure that you only take advice from people that you really trust and that you know understand you and have your best interest at heart. And the other one would just be the art of the cold call. If you want information about something, definitely, as the other people on this call have said, seek it out and it can become available to you. My plans for the future are that currently I think I'll be staying in the UK for at least another year to continue working at my center and go full time there. So that will be exciting.
That's really exciting. And Greta, would you be kind enough to draw this to a close with your tip and plans for the future?
Oh man. Yeah, so the tip that I would give is that if you do decide that applying for these scholarships is something that you have time for and energy for to put in, view it as a win-win situation, because whether or not you're successful in the scholarship process of receiving the scholarship, I feel like going through the process itself made me a much more confident researcher in that I knew what I wanted my research to accomplish, what I wanted to do, where I wanted my career to be going. And it made me a little bit better at talking about it as well, which I think is always really valuable. So I think the whole process should be viewed kind of lightly and with positive energy. And then next year, I will be attending Oxford. I'm going to be really focusing in on water. I'm going to be doing their MSc in Water Science Policy and Management. And then hopefully after that, I'll return to the US and I'll do a PhD in Water Systems Engineering. So, but we'll see.
Congratulations on that, Greta, and I'm sure you've got all three of you incredible futures in front of you. It's been wonderful to hear about your journeys and to each of the individual stories, but also to see some of those themes that I think have cut across them. Thank you so much for being here. Shall I hand back to you, Hayley, or to you, Alana, to close the session?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Huge thank you to Lana and Tom for the overview of University of Anglia, and Tom, you're an excellent moderator, and also to the scholars, Kayla and Greta, thanks for kind of representing Marshall. I really appreciate it. And Jada, it was really interesting to hear your feedback as a Fulbright applicant as well. So thanks everyone for participating, and I'm really pleased that both Greta and Kayla will be in the UK for another year. It's really exciting. Thanks all of you for joining us as well. Like I said, this has been recorded and it will be circulated for your colleagues who aren't able to join. One of the questions asked as well on the RSVP was whether you're happy to be contacted afterwards. So if you said yes to that, we'll be sharing your details with everyone on the panel today in case you have any questions. That's all from me. Alana, did you want to say anything to close?
Not necessarily anything too special, but if there is anything anybody needs, again, feel free to reach out to us. We're more than happy to help you out with whatever it is. Hopefully I'll see you at a future NAFA conference next summer, maybe. We'll see. Is it next year it will be? But yeah, we'll see. Hopefully see you all soon. And then again, just make sure to reach out if there is anything you need. I know our scholars are probably happy to hear from you or Tom or myself again, if there is anything you want. So thanks for attending.
Thanks, everyone.